Good day and thank you for joining us. So if you can remember, in last week's lesson we looked at products, right? More basic products, going over the different rules, how to times out brackets, how to get the simplest form and all that type of stuff. So in this week what we'll be doing is cramming basically all of it together. As you can see by this first example, literally crammed together, we are going to be timesing out brackets and all of that type of stuff. So we can see we have monomial times a binomial squared here, a binomial times a binomial, and then a monomial times a binomial times a binomial. So all of the different ones we've learned are going to sort of be squished into these examples. The most important thing to do when we are facing these examples is to just break it all up into different parts, right? If we break it all up in different parts, it's not as confusing. If we just view it as solving this part first, then this part, and then this part, and then bring it all together at the end when we're dealing with our like terms. Cool. So what we're going to do is just get started right away. And looking at the first part here, we have monomial times a binomial squared. So what I'm going to do is I'll break it up like this for you guys. So monomial times a binomial squared. So what we'd usually do is then we'll do the binomial squared first. So we're going to have 2a squared b, open bracket, 2a minus 3b, open bracket, 2a minus 3b. So you can see there we've already broken up this part now to be into our first step that we need to get into, so we need to times that binomials out. Then moving on, we have a binomial times binomial. What we can do straight away is solve those. We'll keep that negative sign so long over there. So we'll solve these binomials. So we'll times 2a by 2a and then 2a by 3b. So 2a times 2a gives me 4a squared. And then 2a times 3b gives me plus 6ab. Negative 3b times 2a gives me negative 6ab. And then a negative 3b times positive 3 gives me negative 9b squared. Sorry, negative 9b squared. And straight away we can see here that we can cancel out these in the middle, because it's negative 6a plus 6a. Additive inverses that will cancel each other out. Then moving on, we have a monomial times the binomial times the binomial. Let me just show you the sections that we've worked in. We've worked on that now. And lastly, we're going to be looking at this part over here. Cool. You can see I've included the minus sign because that's part of the monomial here in front. And this negative sign over here, we've kept it over here. Okay. So what I preferably do first is times the binomial by the binomial. So we'll keep the negative 2a. And once we've done that, we're timesing out the brackets here, the binomial times binomial. So we have 2 times 3 giving me 6. 2 times negative b giving me negative 2b. And then we have negative b times 3, which gives me negative 3b. And then negative b times negative b gives me positive b squared. Cool. Moving on now, we move to our next line. So what we can do now is still keep that 2a squared b and times this binomials out. And what we end up getting is 4a squared. That is the 2a times 2a. 2a times negative 3b. We get negative 6ab. And negative 3b times 2a gives me negative 6ab once again. And negative 3b times negative 3 gives me positive 9b squared. Cool. And then what we left with over here, remember we have 4a squared minus 9b squared here in the brackets. So what we can do here is say, we can times that negative into the bracket now. So remember this negative will times into 4a squared, then it will times into 9b, negative 9b squared. So what we end up getting now is a negative times a positive, that's a negative 4a squared. A negative times a negative gives me a positive 9b squared. And then we're going to times this negative 2a into our brackets over here. Just to simplify the brackets, it's going to be a 6 minus 5b, because that's the negative 2 minus 3b. So it's in the minus 5b plus b squared. So we're timesing the negative 2a into this bracket. So we'll say negative 2a times 6, that gives me negative 12a. Negative 2a times a negative 5ab, that gives me positive 10ab. And then negative 2a times positive b squared, that gives me negative 2ab squared. And so now the final over here, we have to times this monomial into this polynomial over here. Okay, well, let's just simplify this quickly. Negative 6ab minus 6ab gives me negative 12ab. So we'll disregard that. So we times this monomial into this trinomial over here. So we have 2a squared b times 4a squared. We get 8a to the power of 4b. Then we're doing 2a squared b times a negative 12ab. So we're getting negative 24a to the power of 3, b to the power of 2. So you can see here we're focusing. Remember breaking it down. Coefficient times coefficient. That was 2 times negative 12 gave me negative 24. 8 to the power of 2 times 8 to the power of 1, that gave me 8 to the power of 3. And b times b gives me b squared. And now we'll find times that final term in the brackets. So it's 2a squared b times 9b squared. So we're getting positive 18a squared, because a is nothing to times, and then b to the power of 3. And then we will just bring all of our other things in now. So we have negative 4a squared over here, plus 9b squared, minus 12a, plus 10ab, minus 2ab squared. Cool, so what we'll do now is we'll look for any like terms that might exist. Not saying that they are like terms, but we'll just have a look. So we'll focus here on a to the power of 4b. Are there any other a to the power of 4b's? No, there aren't. Are there any a cubed b squared? A cubed b squared? No, there aren't. Are there any 18a squared b to the power of 3? No, there is not. Are there any other a squareds? No. B squareds? No. A's by themselves? No. Are there any other AB's? No. And are there any other AB squares? No. Making this over here, guys, our final answer, which is quite big, as we have worked out a lot from that starting question, right? So that is going to be your final answer for this example. So very important, you need to break up the example, okay? So here we can see we broke it up into a monomial times a binomial squared. And that you can see we worked out by itself here up until the end. Then we had a binomial times a binomial, which we worked out. And then we had a monomial times a binomial times a binomial. So very important first step, always break up your expression into its different types of products. So you can work it out all separately, and here at the end bring it all together to your final answer. Moving on now, we have a binomial times a trinomial. So, as we know, what we're going to do first is this first term over here will times into the first term, then it will times into the second term, and then that will times into the third term, right? And once we've done that, we can move on to our second term here in this bracket and times it into the first term, into the second term, and into the third term. So let's just follow along with that. So we are working out now. So we're first doing x squared times x squared in that bracket over there. What we end up getting here is x to the power of 4, right? Then we're timesing x squared into positive 2x. And we're getting positive 2x to the power of 3. Just remember that's the 2 plus the invisible 1 over here. And then we're timesing x squared also into minus 6. And once we do that, we get minus 6x squared. So that is the first term in the binomial times in the trinomial. Now we'll move on to the second term. So we're moving into positive 2 times x squared. And that will give us a positive 2x squared. Then we're moving into positive 2 times 2x. That will give us positive 4x. And then we're moving into 2 times negative 6. And that will give us negative 12. And so now we'll look for any like terms that we can times. And we see that we do have a like term in negative 6x squared and positive 2x squared. So if we just simplify all of these down, it's x to the power 4 plus 2x to the power 3. So minus 6x squared plus 2x squared, we get negative 4x squared plus 4x minus 12. And that over there is our final answer, as there are no more like terms to add or subtract. So very important, even if it takes you extra time, just so that in your practice time, when you're practicing, you need to write in timesing x squared into x squared into 2x, and then x squared into negative 6. Same with the 2 times into the bracket. Break down your examples. Okay guys? And that will make it easier to work through. Moving on now to our number 3 over here, which is another hectic one. As we can see, it's quite long. We have a binomial times a binomial, then we have a binomial squared, and then we have a monomial times a binomial. So what we'll do first is obviously break it up. We're going to do first the binomial times binomial. Then we will do, leaving the negative sign out, because we'll times that into the answer of our binomial squared, which we will work out separately as well. And then our monomial times our binomial, keeping that positive because that positive is part of the monomial, right? So let's get into working it out. I will do this in red since I've used all the other colors to allocate which sections we're working out. So we'll work out the binomial squared first. Binomial times binomial. So x times x, we're going to get x squared. And then x times 3y, we're going to get positive 3xy. Then negative 2y times x, we get negative 2xy. And then lastly, we look at negative 2y times 3y, we get negative 6y squared. And that is the binomial times binomial solved. Then we will bring down that negative to stay there. And this is going to be x squared minus 2y times x squared minus 2y, because this is our binomial squared. Just fix that, minus 2y. And then lastly, what we can do is work out this monomial times binomial. And so the answer we get here is, so we say xy times x. It's going to give me positive x squared y. And then xy times 3y gives me 3xy squared, and this is positive. Okay. And so we see the last thing that we need to work out now is the binomial times binomial in the middle over there. Cool. So we have x squared here plus 3xy. Sorry, my bad. We can quickly just simplify this part over here. We have 3xy minus 2xy. That gives me plus 1xy, so we'll just write it as xy. So this was the 3xy minus 2xy. Cool. And then we have minus 6y squared. Minus, now we'll work out our binomial times binomial. So x squared times x squared gives me x to the power of 4. x squared times negative 2y gives me negative 2x squared y. Then negative 2y times x squared gives me negative 2x squared y. And negative 2y times negative 2y gives me positive 4y squared. And that's all plus x squared y plus 3xy squared. Just wanting to fit that in that line over there. Okay, and then last thing we'll do now is times this negative into this whole bracket over here, because the negative is standing alone in front, so it will times in. So we have x squared plus xy minus 6y squared. So negative times positive, that's negative x to the power 4. Negative times negative gives me positive 2x squared y. And then negative times negative gives me another positive 2x squared y. And negative times a positive gives me a negative 4y squared. Plus x squared y plus 3xy squared. So from this point what we'll do is look for any like terms. So looking at x squared, do we have any other x squareds standing alone? No, we do not. Then we'll look for any xy's. Do we have any other standalone xy's? No, we do not. All of them have a power. Then we'll look for negative, so we look for y squareds now to find for the negative 6y squared. Any other y squareds, we see here that we do have a y squared in negative 4y squared, right? So what we'll do is we'll start by writing out what we know so far. We know that there's nothing to add to the x squared, so we write the x squared. There's nothing to add to the xy, so we write plus xy. So now we'll look at negative 6y squared minus 4y squared. So it's minus 6 minus 4. Remember, if signs are the same, we add the numbers together and keep the sign. So that's minus, and then 6 plus 4 gives me 10y squared. Then we'll grab another color here and we'll look for anything else that's x to the power of 4. There are no other x's to the power of 4. So we'll write that down as negative x to the power of 4. We'll grab another color here. We have x squared y. Are there any other x squared y? Is the one over here. And there's also one over here. Cool. So there are 3 things to add now. So that's 2x squared y plus 2x squared y plus x squared y. So that's 2 plus the invisible 1 over there. So that's going to be plus 5x squared y. And then we can see that we're only left over with one more term over here, which is plus 3xy squared. And that will give us our final answer. Okay, so guys, with that is going to be the end of our recorded lesson. Thank you so much for joining me, and don't forget that when we are doing these type of examples, what we need to do is, like I did in the first step, break it up into its different parts, and then from there we can work it out, and at the end simplify with like terms. So thanks so much for joining us, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.